Welcome back, and today we're gonna take a look at the War Thunder anniversary sales, and as per usual I will be giving you my recommendations. Now of course some vehicles are simply good, so they're a bit of a no-brainer to buy. Then you have some vehicles that aren't really fantastic, but they are very good value in terms of how much you can actually grind with them. And then you have other vehicles that are completely worthless, whether they are completely shit, or perhaps that's just nothing to grind, or they're just a waste of money altogether because there are cheaper alternatives. If you want to buy anything, my link is in the description. You get no 3% extra off, but you give me a 3% cut and you will get the decal here on the screen. Last time to actually get it on the sales, it will still be up for a little bit, but around the December sales, I should have a new decal. You will still keep this one, but I will be replacing it for people that want to buy something new. Alright, let's get started. And I will start with the planes first and I'll do the tanks after. First off, you have the F4S. Now the F4S is good value. It's rank 7. You can basically grind the entire tree with it. The thing is, there is a chance of course that rank 9 will come around. First off, you have a vehicle that doesn't need an introduction. It's the F4S Phantom, and I do think this thing is worth it. However, it might not be the most fun to play. It's a great grinder. It's very consistent because of the avionics, the HMD, the radar set, and of course the AIM-7Fs in the head-on are pretty potent. And you are able to cash out a lot of money very quickly, and the American tech tree is of course absolutely littered. And because it's rank 7, you will be able to grind out the entire thing. However, the airframe is pretty mediocre, and if people want to send you back to the hangar, they will find a way, because this plane is incredibly over-tiered if it wasn't for the entire kit that it's carrying. So it is a good grinder, it is pretty consistent, just don't expect it to be a whole lot of fun. Now it is a good introduction for learning missiles, using the radar and all that kind of jazz. In that regard, it's pretty easy to fly because you don't really have to worry about flying the plane, because it doesn't really matter how good you are, at the end of the day it is still going to be a hard-wing Phantom. Next up is the Saab J35 XS, which just got changed before the sales went live, because it used to deal with, well, guess what, F-14s, and there are a few issues with that because it doesn't have an RWR. It doesn't have a lot of countermeasures, it only has 12 of them. You have 6 missiles, but they're of the AIM-9J variety, which have very limited range and of course only rear aspect. And then you only have 1 gun as well. The airframe used to be a lot better, it's not that great anymore, and it makes it kind of unbearable to play. However, as a grinder, if you don't want to loiter around too long, because it has absolutely zero endurance, you will be able to grind with it pretty consistently. Now the thing is, do you want to grind the Swedish line? Because there's not that much that is completely unique to it. We have the Gripens, of course, which are still some of the best top tiers in the game. We have the Viggens, which are definitely unique. Then we have another Draken, which is abysmal to play because it doesn't have any countermeasures, less missiles, as well as, well, an extra gun, I guess. But overall, the Saab J35 is a lot better to play. And anything below it really isn't worth it. The J32 and the A32 are unique, but definitely not that great. The J29s, the bus and barrels, are okay, but also not that fantastic. The Saabs, pretty good as a ground pounder, but that's about it. The Vampires you can get in Northern Nations, the Hunter you can get in Northern Nations, as well as the MiG-21 Bis. And then looking at the 109s here, you can also get in another nation. And other than that, this nation doesn't really have anything going for it, other than something like the VL Pure Muskie, which you also have to buy. So overall, I don't think that the Swedish line is worth grinding. If you simply just want to look at pure value, there are some planes here that are pretty good. If you want the Swedish line, be my guest. It has some good vehicles, but I think that if you are looking for a nation to grind, I would go with one of the major ones first. Next up is the A5C. I do think it's a good grinder, however nowadays it's a little bit overshadowed by the J7D. Now the thing is, the J7D right now is not on sale, so if you are willing to wait, I would say wait until the December sales. But if you really want to pick something up right now and you want something, the A5C is a pretty decent grinder. You can climb straight in, you can drop your load, and you can magic some people and go back to your runway. It only has 18 countermeasures, they are large caliber, they aren't that fantastic, but they get the job done. A5C is pretty consistent, however, as I said, wait for the J7D instead if you can, because right now it's the same BR as the MiG-21 Bis is. But of course, it's not on sale right now, so you will have to wait until December probably. Next up is going to be the SU-39, and I really can't recommend this thing in any stretch of the imagination. It's underpowered, it doesn't have the best missiles, and overall, at 11.7, this thing is borderline useless. Now, if you are looking for a ground pounder, it does of course have the Vickers here. I forgot which one it is, but they are here somewhere. This one. So that is fantastic. Oh, fantastic. Fuck this. Next up is going to be the SU-39, and I really cannot recommend you this thing whatsoever. The SU-39 at 11.7 is severely overtiered, at least in RRB. In ground RB, of course, you get the Vickers, you have some pretty decent missiles, and you get the R60Ms. But overall, this is pretty mid. Now, it does get R73s as well, but you don't get an HMD. And overall, this plane isn't that fantastic to fly. It's probably some of the worst purchases you can make right now if you are looking to play it in air RB. Ground RB, you're probably still going to get gunned down by an AA. I can't really comment on that. But personally, I would say skip this one, and I'd rather buy the truck with a house strapped on top of it, if I have to be completely honest with you. And then next up, we have the F4 EJ ADTW. And this is one of those ones where I kind of hate it. I think it's absolutely abysmal. But, you know, you have to play one anyway if you want to grind. And it does circumvent the absolutely terrible rank 6. And it also skips the absolutely atrocious, for the most part, rank 5. All you can really play here is the Kika as well as the F30. And while the F30 is great if you talisman it, you then still have to grind through rank 6. It's not the best plane, it's a mediocre airframe, it doesn't have a fantastic radar, it doesn't have a pulse Doppler even. Now, there are some talks about the fact that it might get one in the future, but of course I can't guarantee this, and I don't want to promise you something that it might not get. Overall, the top tier of the Japanese is pretty okay, because the F-15J is the better C, the F-15AJ is probably one of the best A model F-16s, and the F-15J, I mean, the American one is better in my opinion, but it does get slightly better missiles. The thing here is that if you only care about the Japanese props, where the most of the unique stuff is, you're gonna be fine with one of the rank 4, perhaps even the rank 5 premium, and you're gonna be completely set. But if you really want the top tier, I do think it's worth your money, because a talisman for this thing not on sale is like 3,000 anyway, which runs you about 20 bucks-ish. So in that regard, I do think it's worth your money if you do want to grind it. The plane itself, however, isn't all that fantastic, and I do want to warn you about that. Next up is going to be the TU1. I'm just not even going to say anything about this thing. It is abysmal. There's really no reason to buy it. So, you know, just wait for the MiG-23 ML, I guess, in the future as well. And I skipped one, and it's going to be the Wyvern. Now, the Wyvern is easily one of the best pickups in the game. And I hate recommending this thing, and I say it every year. But this thing goes 650 kilometers an hour on the deck at 4.3. It has an absolute metric load of ammo. You get an air spawn. It climbs pretty okay. And on top of that, the bomb load also isn't that shabby. So, or the rocket load, whatever you want to call it. This thing gets some grinding done. It's pretty cheap. And especially for the British nation, which doesn't have that many great grinders anyway, I think that the Wyvern is one of the must picks out of the sale. And you will be able to grind all the way down to rank 5 with it. And then you can see whatever you want a talisman. Next up is the F4 Junk. And this is one of those where I will say, please don't do it. It's in the same boat as the F4 EJ. It's simply not that great. It does get a pulse Doppler. But yeah, of course, need to run the gun port if you want a gun, which is going to hamper the performance even more than it already, well, lacks. It doesn't really have any performance to begin with. So overall, this thing is terrible to play. You will be able to grind decently consistent with it for the same reason as with the F4S, but it's simply not great, and I don't think there is that much to grind with it. Personally, wait for the Bison to go on sale, because this plane is simply not it. Also, of course, more value, but as of right now, it's 75 bucks, and I will never pay 75 bucks for a plane in War Thunder, even if I had to actually purchase it myself. And I mean, over here, there's really not that much to grind with it. Personally, I would just wait for the Bison. Most of these planes are pretty abysmal. I would say get the Reaper on sale if you didn't do that last week. And then you can talisman something like the, well, I used to say the Javelin, but they might just nerf this thing into the ground when the next patch comes out, because the afterburner below 4 kilometers will not produce full thrust anymore. We'll have to see how it works, but for now, be careful with buying the F4 junk. It's gonna be one of those planes where you only have to buy one thing, and you will be able to get the entire tree with it, but it's just one of those planes that's really not that fantastic, unfortunately. Next up is going to be the Dora pack, and the Dora pack is fantastic. It's great value if you only care about the props, or maybe the early jets as well from the Germans, and then you really get all the World War II stuff. And I think that this is an absolute bargain sale. It has a pretty decent climb, it doesn't compress, it has the boosted ailerons, and it will be able to roll very well at basically any speed, whereas something like the D9, for example, it has a more low altitude tuned engine, which I think is superior. However, it doesn't get boosted ailerons, and it lacks the extra 20 mil in the nose. Instead, it gets 2 of the 13 millimeters. Now, if you already have most of the props, I still think this is worth it, mainly because of the premium bonus. And if you like Doras, this is going to be an absolutely fantastic grinder for you. Of course, if you care about top tier, I don't think it's that great of a pickup. But if you only care about the low tier stuff, you will be able to buy this. Then you can maybe talisman something like the Jabo. Perhaps you can talisman the MiG-15 BIS, and then maybe if you are a little bit further down the line, you can talisman the LIM-5P, the G91R3, or perhaps the CL-13B as well. There's plenty of options here. I don't think there is that many things that you really want to get at top tier. The MiG-29G is probably the most unique addition here that you can really get in the Russian line. The F4F is just not it, and I really don't think it's worth grinding all your way down the top tier, because most of these planes are simply just worse than the Russian counterparts. The MiG-21 MF, the SMT is better. The 109G, I mean, yeah, I guess, but I wouldn't fly an F104 in these days anyway. F4F, it's basically an F4E. The MLA, the MLD is better. The Su-17s, Su-22, just not worth your time. Tornado, why are you doing this to yourself? So overall, I don't think it's really worth it. And if you really want a top tier grinder, I would just say get the Lazur M when it goes on sale in December. And yes, that it's been a bit of a trend today. Then we have the A6E TRAM Intruder, and same boat really as I had a little bit earlier, where I will tell you to just not pick this thing up. You can kit it out so you can play it in ground RB. You can of course also kit it out to play in an air RB by like getting a single gun and like 3 of the missiles, but it's not that fantastic. It flies like an absolute turd. It is flyable, it is an okay grinder, but personally FRS any day of the week over this thing, because it is so severely limited. It's not even that consistent, because if your enemy uses their flare key, that's a very big likelihood that you're not going to be killing anything. And then lastly, it's going to be the F104S, and the F104S is also not that great. And I hate that I have to basically call everything shit today. But this plane, I mean, in terms of a grinder, it's pretty okay. You get 6 missiles. The F104 flight model nowadays is pretty sad. The thing is, with Italy, you just have so many vehicles at top tier. You have an F-16 ADF. You have a Tornado if you so desire. You have an AV-8B if you so desire. We have a MiG-29 and we have a Gripen. We have a lot of variety here. And if you are looking for a singular nation to grind, to fly a plethora of different types of planes, this is a pretty decent pick. Keep in mind, other than that, rank 7 here is pretty mid. The AMX is pretty unique, but all these other planes are kind of flyable in different nations. I know the F104S technically isn't, but there's plenty of F104s, and they all feel pretty terrible as of right now. Now, of course, the G91Y feels fantastic. The Sagittario is pretty good. The MiG-17 PF is pretty good. And other than that, this nation is all about the props, but then you don't really need to buy such a high tier premium. And that's it for the planes. A little bit mediocre today. I'm expecting most of the other stuff to go on sale in December like I did last year, but we'll just have to wait and see. As of right now, the sales are pretty bare bone. And then we have arrived at tanks. Now these are not my personal recommendations, but a friend of mine is recommending them to me, so I can recommend them to you. First off is the M1A1 Click-Bait, and it's a good tank, but buying into 11.3 is honestly not really worth it, especially when there are better options like the KVT, which we will get to in a minute. The Leopard 2A4 is one of the most well-rounded and strongest MBTs that is above average or better in every regard, making it very adaptable and very fitting for most playstyles, so overall a pretty good pickup. The Type 90B Fuji is a bit of a glass cannon, stupid high rate of fire, a lot of damage to be put down range, but the survivability is a bit questionable. If you're able to counter 3, you know it's not that many crew members, and the armor is a bit hit or miss, so expect to die in this thing very quickly, but if you do get in a good position, you will be able to farm them very, very quickly. The Strv 121B Christian is the same as the Leopard 2A4, so I don't really have to say anything about it, and then we have arrived at the Merkava. It's pretty well rounded, but it does have some areas that it lacks in and some others that it excels in. It's pretty well armored. It does survive a decent amount of damage due to the weird layout of the vehicle. It almost has the best shell in the Israeli tech tree, but the mobility is a little bit lacking and it's a little bit slow to get into position opposed to some of the other MBTs. Personally, he would say that the 2D is a slightly better and cheaper alternative, but as of right now, that is also unfortunately not on sale. Next up is the T72AV TURMS, and it's a pretty well-rounded tank with good optics and a good gun, but otherwise not the most mobile, and it faces a lot of good tanks like the 2A4 Premium Lamau. There are better options if you don't mind losing the ability to research tier 8, which is only 3 tanks anyway, and we're talking about the T55AM here, but I'll get to that in a minute. Next up is the Leopard with the 120mm, good damage, decent mobility, overall a very well-rounded tank that is a bit of a glass cannon. Gun hits extremely hard, but it basically has no armor to speak of. Then you have the M1 KVT, and it's probably one of the best well-rounded grinders for the US ground tree. It's the MBT equivalent of the M18. It's very fast, good reload, but the armor is pretty mediocre and should not be relied upon. Absolute icon over here, T29, it's a heavy tank, it's not the fastest and the most mobile, the gun hits hard, a lot of post-ban damage, pretty decent penetration as well, and of course the armor on this thing is nothing short but incredible. Hull down, this thing is an absolute menace. Then we have the T55AM1, it's pretty stable at the battle rating, very well rounded, can phase it, can easily kill it, but it's also very strong in the down tiers, while still being pretty okay in the up tiers with a decent selection of ammo types. Then we have the Centauro RGO, and it's a wheel tank with a decent gun. Not much to say about it here. Good gun, good maneuverability, but the armor is essentially non-existent. And then we have the Object 120, which is kind of in the same boat, except it just has a good gun, no mobility, and also no armor. Absolute glass cannon, but whatever you point at is very likely to die. Then we have the XM1. He just says, get the KVT instead. The XM1 has very much overstayed its welcome a little bit. And then lastly here is nothing. I can't talk about the ships or the helicopters because I don't really know anyone that plays either, especially the premium ones. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to use the link if you forgot to do so. And you will see me all in the next one.